It's another beautiful day for baseball in Los Angeles. And baseball podcast. Josh Schaefer and Blake Harris cover everything Dodgers right here on Inside the Ravine.
How is it going, everyone? Welcome to a brand new episode of Inside the Ravine. Joining me, as always, my co-host Josh Schaefer, who somehow, someway manages to find a new backdrop once again. Josh has recorded from his apartment before, but this looks like a brand new one with a Detroit Red Wings background, or a Detroit Red Wings newspaper celebration from, I guess, when they won a championship. But there's a Dodger thing in the background with Vince Scully, so all is said and done. Josh, how are we doing over there today?
Oh, we're doing well. Had a game last night on the road, so now back today. So I actually think I've tried to use this location before and thought that the lighting wasn't very good. And I didn't think about that this time until after we started recording. So this is what we're going to get today. Because usually I sit over there in the corner. We've got like a big high top table in the corner right next to the windows. There's a lamp. That's usually where I go. But I think we're in too deep at this point, so we're staying here.
No, it looks good. Looks good. And you're also rocking that Cal Baptist shirt. And I think Cal Baptist is still alive. They won yesterday in the WAC. Is it the WAC tournament?
The WAC tournament, as of the time of recording. At the time of this recording, the Lancers are still alive. So we'll see how long that lasts. The women's team, though, the women's team is really good. WAC champs, WAC regular season champs. We'll see what happens in the women's tournament, though. So,
well, there you go. There you go. Go Lancers. As a fellow Lancer myself, Josh, we have a jam-packed show today. A lot to get to. Before we get to all of this stuff, make sure you guys follow the show, whatever social media app you guys use. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Inside the Ravine. So make sure to follow us if you're on one of those apps. You guys can also watch the full shows over on YouTube. Just go and search Inside the Ravine on YouTube, and you can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, and of course, we are on the beautiful Odyssey app. Now, Josh, a couple of things before we get to the latest Dodgers news and predicting our 26-man rosters for opening day. I have two things for you. Things you couldn't prepare for. I always love when I ambush you with questions that you can't do any preparation for. You got to just come up with on the spot. The first one should be easy. It should be a no-brainer for you. My first question is, will you be waking up at 3 a.m. next week to watch both of these Dodgers games when they're in Seoul?
Blake, I don't think I will be. So good luck. But I mean, come on. Like, what I feel like, what's the local time? It's like a night game local time, right?
I think so. I'm not great with time differences.
Well, okay. Look, we're just looking it up. We're just looking it up. So right now, at the time of this recording, okay, so it's like oh, good Lord. Okay. It's like an 8-hour difference. So, like, let's think about this for a second. If they had a noon game over there, it would be an 8 p.m. start here. I think I'm doing that math right. What is so bad about that?
So I'm looking at this right now. It's currently 12:17 p.m., and it is 4:17 a.m. over there.
Wait. Yeah, no, it's Friday over there.
All right, Josh, we went to Arizona State. I think we could put our math to the test here. So it's 4:17 a.m. there. So they're 8 hours behind us. So if it's a 3 a.m. here...
They're ahead of us. It's Friday.
Oh, that's right. We're getting out of hand here. So they're ahead of us. So now all of a sudden, they're 16 hours ahead.
They're 16 hours ahead.
All right, so Josh, if the game's at 3 a.m., I think that would be a 7 p.m. first pitch. This took way too long for us both to do, but I think we came up with a 7 p.m. first pitch. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, why?
Is my math mathing?
Why do we have to do that? Just push it to the next day over there and then have it at a reasonable time here. And you know what bothers me more than anything, Blake? This drives me absolutely insane. And to answer the question, let's just get out of the way. No, I'm not waking up at 3 a.m. What drives me absolutely bonkers is it's like, oh, well, at least it's only 7 a.m. or at least it's only 6 a.m. on the East Coast. It's like, great. So they can wake up on the East Coast and watch it early if they want. But on the West Coast, with the two teams that are playing in the actual game, it's 3 a.m. So it's like, that has driven me crazy because I have had people ask me before if I planned on waking up, and I'm like, no, there's a billion other games for me to watch. I'm not going to watch those two. Sorry, but also that's going to be a work weekend, so it's just not going to happen for me. But
Yeah.
like, I've had people actually say, well, like, at least it's not that bad on the East Coast. I'm like, well, that's worse for me. Like that to
Right.
me, that makes it worse because it's like now
They're
you've
not going to be
got the East
watching.
Coast. Who cares? They're not going to care.
Right.
Like, sure, maybe they're going to be like, oh, I am not waking up at 6 to watch Shohei. But if he's hitting by the 7th inning and it's now 8 o'clock, like, yeah, I'll watch that. Like, that's 5 o'clock over here. The two teams playing in the games are on the same. They're an hour and a half apart. Like, what are we doing here?
I was telling this to
And
my
it's fine.
girlfriend.
It's good. It's good for baseball, and it's good for Korea. It's good
Yeah.
for South Korea. Like I think that's a huge thing. I just think that the time of first pitch in Seoul could be changed a little bit to then also benefit the fans that are watching over here who care about those two teams. And I'm not saying like in comparison to the fans locally in Seoul, but I'm saying to the rest of North America, like the fans in Southern California actually care. So they're the ones who are going to watch compared to fans in, New York, Boston, Philly. Like, they're not going to care. So, like, why don't we cater a little bit more to the fans on the West Coast, but then also make it still a reasonable time for the fans in Seoul? I'm sure we could work something out, but no, not today,
It's
Blake.
the most inconvenient time because if it was at 1 a.m., I could see pushing a late night. You stay up till midnight, you push it till 1 a.m., and then when the game ends, you go to bed at 3 a.m. Or at 5 a.m., you wake up at 4:50. It's a slight early wake up call, but waking up at 5 a.m. is doable. 3 a.m. is like in the worst possible time where you can't just stay up. Because then if you stay up, you're going to bed at 5:30 a.m., and you might as well just keep it going. Or you just try to go to bed at like 9 or 10 p.m., maybe, and then get a couple hours, then wake up at 3. It's like the worst possible time. The only thing I'm looking forward to about this, Josh, is the fact that I'll be in Vegas for March Madness next week, and I get to wake up Thursday at 6 or 7 a.m. whenever I wake up and see if I have a winning ticket. Because you better believe I'll be going hard on the Dodgers with Yamamoto on the mound in Game 2, a nice little money line ticket. And then, yeah, you wake up at 6 a.m. and see if you won. I hope I wake up to good news.
Yeah.
So,
well, for your sake, I hope so too.
But I also will not be watching both games. I will not be up. Maybe if I can't
No.
sleep and I wake up and it's like 3:30, I'll put it on, but that's just going to mess up my sleep schedule. I'll record it, skim through it, but like you said, Josh, there's like 160 other games that we can get to. But hey,
Yeah.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So
It'll
7
be
p.m.
fun.
I think.
It'll be fun.
7 p.m. first pitch over there in Seoul.
Yeah.
We have 2 college degrees between the two of us, and I think that's what we were able to come up with. But Josh, speaking of college degrees, one final thing for you that I want you to see you put to the test. I don't know if you've looked at the calendar today, but as a former Blaze Pizza employee, this is a pretty massive day for us in the pizza world. Today's Pi Day. So Josh,
Yeah.
I don't know if your Arizona State education is going to be able to back you up on this, but I'm going to have to ask you right now to list off as many numbers of pi as you possibly can off the top of your head from what you can remember. I got it up right here, so I'll be following along with you. So whenever you want to kick it off, we'll see how far you can go.
Okay. 3.14159. What comes after the 9? 3.14159. 6? Is that wrong?
Yeah, you're a little ahead. It's 2-6.
Oh, I was going to go 6.2. Okay. So it's 3.14159. 2.6. 2.6.8?
No.
No, I'm not. I can't get past that.
I tried doing this because I was thinking about this before I came on, so I wrote down how far I was able to go. I was able to go like a few more past you. I got to 3.14159, 265, 35, 8979. That's how far I got because for some
That's
reason,
pretty good, I
Josh,
feel.
maybe it's the Arcadia School District. I don't know if you had this when you were younger, but our middle school on Pi Day had a thing where it was a contest for the entire school. Whoever could go the furthest in reading off pi. I forget what they won. It was something massive, but it was essentially, yeah, you want to go for it, go up there. So I went up there on stage in front of the entire school, and I got about 10 numbers in. And I think I was the second one to go. And I was like, heck yeah, because the person in front of me, I think, said like 3.14 and they were done and got like a standing ovation. And then I went up there and went like 10 deep, and I'm like, oh, it's so over. And then a couple kids later, got about 40 or 50 in, and I didn't win.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Wow, you were feeling confident like 10 in, too.
I was.
Wow.
I was like, man, I'm getting this prize, but happy Pi Day. And yeah, like I said, I worked at Blaze Pizza a decade ago, Josh. And on Pi Day,
Mm-hmm.
Blaze Pizzas are $3.14. Those days were miserable. Josh, just don't ask Mari for a free pizza.
Yeah, I've been told, because I was told that Mari could give me a free pizza by somebody who hosts this show whose name is not Josh Schaefer, and then I was vastly disappointed. I will say last year on Pi Day, it was last year I was like right when the March Madness app comes out, because now you can watch conference tourneys or whatever. So we were streaming a March Madness game in the rain in beautiful Pasadena next to the original Blaze, I believe. And we waited in line for 25 minutes, did not move a step, and decided, does anybody like Little Caesars? So we went to Little Caesars instead.
There you go. So shout out to Blaze Pizza. I put in two hard years there, and yeah, it was a good time.
I'm proud.
All right, Josh, why don't we talk about the latest Dodgers news before we get to our 26-man roster predictions? We talked about this last week, kind of. We were talking about the Dodgers. We were talking about shortstop. We were talking about what to do because of the Gavin Lux issues. And literally, I want to say 5 minutes after we finished recording, I sent you a bunch of tweets because I guess, joke's on us for recording right before 1:30, that the Dodgers made a change at shortstop. They announced that Mookie Betts would be sliding over to shortstop, Gavin Lux would be sliding over to second base, and this would be a permanent thing. Now, we didn't talk about this as an option on last week's episode. We essentially just talked about Gavin Lux figuring it out, or maybe having Miguel Rojas. But the Dodgers clearly had seen enough, and with the season getting ready to start, they wanted to make the move now to give Mookie as much time as possible. So, Josh, it's been a week now since the news dropped, but what are your thoughts on the Dodgers making the switch, putting Mookie Betts over at shortstop and sliding Gavin Lux over back to second base?
Well, I think it's interesting because I still think that Mookie's going to play a lot of different positions this year for the Dodgers. But look, I mean, we agreed on the last show that there was an issue with Gavin Lux, but then we also thought that maybe we didn't need to overreact quite yet. But clearly the Dodgers had other plans, and they think that this is the time to act. So, yeah, I mean, clear. And then even that day, right? It was that day we saw things that were not great from Gavin Lux. Even at second base, there were a couple of bad throws that he made. So again, I still think it's just him coming back from all the time off. But look, like they feel confident with Mookie at short. Obviously, Mookie's going to play anywhere where he's told to play because that's just the kind of player that he is. And he's also the kind of player that is just going to excel wherever you play him. So look, if that's where the Dodgers see it best to have Mookie Betts play and move Lux back over to second base, then so be it. But at the same time, like I said before, you've also got Miguel Rojas. So I think Mookie Betts is going to play a lot of outfield this year. And I think that Miguel Rojas is going to play a lot at shortstop this year. And who knows, maybe at some point we do see Gavin Lux playing at short. But at least right now going forward, looks like it's going to be Mookie Betts and Miguel Rojas.
It is a little interesting they didn't give it more time just because they came into spring training going, Gavin Lux is going to be the everyday guy, Mookie Betts is going to be the everyday guy at second. And the Dodgers had to have had some idea that Gavin Lux, recovering from this ACL injury, not having played baseball in a year, he would be rusty. Now, granted, rusty's one thing, but it's another when you're just making an error on every play. So again, maybe the Dodgers just saw enough and they thought better to slide him over to second base where it's a shorter throw. My only issue with this entire thing. I got no problem if Mookie is the shortstop a couple games a week. I think that's fine. But being the everyday starting shortstop, the whole reason he moved from right field to second base was because it was supposed to be less taxing on him. It's, a lot less work than having to play right field. They kind of want to keep the $365 million man healthy. But now you're just putting him back over at shortstop, which is probably outside of catcher, the most taxing position in all of baseball. So I am kind of worried that over a full season, Mookie Betts, his body might not hold up at shortstop because he is a little tiny guy. I mean, Josh, you and I might be taller than Mookie Betts, and that's saying something. I worry about his long term health, especially if Gavin Lux still sucks at second base. Um, that's my biggest concern. It's not about how if Mookie's going to be playing Gold Glove caliber defense. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll play above average defense, but I don't think necessarily you're getting the kind of defense that you'd be expecting with like a Miguel Rojas. So that was kind of my biggest worry with this entire thing is just that I don't know over the course of 162 how Mookie's going to be able to hold up.
Yeah, it's a little concerning, but I think that's why, my thought going in is that we are going to see Miguel Rojas quite a bit playing short.
Yeah.
And because I just don't see. Look, and we've alluded to this before. I talked about it last week on the show. Like for Dave Roberts, an off day's an off day. We talk about this all the time. Like Dodgers need a run late, and Max Muncy's got the day off. Max Muncy's not coming in the eighth inning to pinch hit. Like that's just how it's been. Especially if it's not even just he's on the bench today, but if this is an off day, you're turning to Austin Barnes in the eighth inning with nobody on and 2 outs. Like that's what we've seen, and that's fine. But I do think that's going to be a reason why we see Miguel Rojas a lot, and maybe we do see Gavin Lux at short, because I do think it's going to be taxing on Mookie Betts, and we'll see. If this is permanent, they say this is going to be the move going forward, but maybe it won't be permanent. Maybe it's going to be, let's see how long this lasts. And if we make moves later on, we have to. But again, like I'm still holding firm in the opinion I had last week, which is they don't need to make a trade or try to go get anybody else right now. I feel like your opinion on that might have changed a little bit. But I'm still holding steady.
Yeah, I'm 50-50 on both. I'm 50-50 on make a trade, but I'm 50-50 on hold and pat because I have come around to the whole idea of Miguel Rojas, where defensively, we've talked about this a number of times. He's one of the best shortstops in all of baseball. It's just that at the plate, last year was really bad, but Josh, I crunched the numbers on Miguel Rojas. Last season, over his final 46 games, he hit 270, had a 104 WRC plus. We talked about this last offseason when the Dodgers signed Miguel Rojas, saying he doesn't need to be posting all-star numbers. If he can post like a 250 average, have a WRC plus from like 80 to 90, we'll gladly take that. If he posts the numbers he posted in the second half last year, the Dodgers they'll be on their knees saying, thank you, Miguel Rojas. Thank you for putting up these numbers. It's just that for the most part last year, you look at his numbers as a whole, they were really, really bad. That's why I was kind of hesitant on it. But with how deep the Dodgers lineup is, with how many additions they've made this offseason, I think this offense is going to be so good. You can afford to have Miguel Rojas hitting ninth in the lineup, because you're going to be having guys like Teoscar Hernandez, James Outman, Jason Hayward hitting in front of him. If you have one weak link in the lineup, I think that's okay. If you have above average defense at shortstop. Now, the one thing I will say on the trade, because I don't think I really mentioned it last week, is the only guy you can trade for is Willy Adames from the Brewers. He's under 1 year of control. I don't know if the Dodgers necessarily want to risk giving up a solid package to get 1 year of control. He's essentially Miguel Rojas defensively, and offensively, he's one of the best power hitting shortstops in all of baseball. But his numbers have taken a bit of a hit in recent years. And again, I don't know if it's worth giving up on Gavin Lux, giving up some other top prospects. So I'm at the point now, Josh, if I had to make a decision, I would just go with Miguel Rojas being your 70 to 80% starting shortstop, give Mookie Betts a start or two there a week, have Mookie Betts over at second base, and essentially Gavin Lux, have him as a bench piece, give him the occasional start a couple weeks at second base, maybe a shortstop if absolutely needed, but I think at this point, Miguel Rojas' glove is far more important than having Gavin Lux's bat in the lineup, because even Gavin Lux, the numbers are okay this spring. I think he's hitting like 280, I want to say. I think he just has a bunch of singles. Like Gavin Lux hasn't looked great at the plate necessarily, so I guess it's not necessarily a major problem for the Dodgers, but it's something to monitor as the season starts in a couple weeks. Because if Gavin Lux continues to struggle at second base, Josh, like you said, I think his first game at second base, he had a couple throwing errors. Things haven't looked great. So if Gavin Lux can't even turn things around at second base, the Dodgers are gonna have to figure out something because it's a major issue with the season starting, like I said, in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're gonna see how it plays out. And again, I'm staying with where I'm at. No need to make any drastic moves yet, outside of maybe putting Mookie full time at short, at least for now. I keep saying full time, but again, something inside of me feels like it's not going to be the most permanent of permanent moves.
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe it's something that lasts a month. Maybe by May, Miguel Rojas is starting at shortstop, or even Gavin Lux. Maybe Gavin Lux, he just proves it. He's able to turn things around. He looks great at second base. They put him back at shortstop. He looks great there. So we'll see. But that's probably the biggest storyline, at least to start the season. I think the Dodgers have. That's going to be interesting to see. Josh, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. This is going to be fun. We're going to be getting to our 26-man roster predictions for the season. But unlike in previous years, this one comes with an added twist that I think is going to make it a little more exciting. So stay tuned for that. All right, we are back. Josh, it's time to get to our 26-man roster predictions. Now, coming into this episode, I had my 26-man roster, and I was like, wow, this for the most part was pretty easy. I think there were like 2 decisions I had to make, but for the most part, it was fairly easy. But as you brought up with me, we also can take a look at the Dodgers' 26-man roster as they head to Seoul for next weekend's games. And Josh, like you mentioned, this is where things can get really interesting because there are a number of players that aren't going to be making the trip. There are a number of players that probably aren't going to be on the roster. So that 26-man roster is going to look kind of different than our regular 26. We'll start with the actual opening day 26-man roster that's in 2 weeks. We'll go over who we think is going to make it, barring everyone being healthy and whatnot. And then when we're done with that, we can kind of take a quick dive into next week and who we think could potentially be added to the roster, who's not going to be, on the roster. Because as of right now, there's a couple of names that we know aren't going to be with the team in Seoul. There isn't confirmation on which guys are going to be healthy. So, Josh, we'll start with the 26-man opening day roster that's in 2 weeks. I'll throw it to you first because this is kind of the easy one. Who are going to be the 13 hitters that you think? There you go. We're adding that one. Who do you think are going to be the 13 hitters that are going to be on the opening day roster 2 weeks from today?
Well, spoiler alert, I think that the 13 hitters are going to be the same as what we see this next week in South Korea. Yeah, so this one was pretty easy for me to kind of figure out. And basically, the guy that I don't have being a part of this group is Miguel Vargas. So for me, obviously, Shohei Ohtani. This is a fun group. We'll call it the infielders, even though Mookie Betts is still listed online as an outfielder. But Mookie Betts, Gavin Lux, Miguel Rojas, Freddie Freeman, and Max Muncy are my group of infielders for the Dodgers. Kike Hernandez and Chris Taylor, both kind of in that mix, but obviously they're the utility guys. I've just got the 3 outfielders, other than Mookie and then the utility guys, Outman, Teoscar Hernandez, and Jason Hayward. And then the 2 catchers, obviously nothing crazy here, Will Smith and Austin Barnes. And those are my 13 hitters that I'm going to have.
Yeah, the 13 hitters have been set for a couple months. They were set like in January when the Dodgers had Manuel Margot, and we were like, well, the 13 position players are set. Nothing else can be done. And then they traded Margot and they brought in Kike Hernandez. So, yeah, the 13 hitters, barring there being something drastic in the next week or two, that seems to be pretty set. And like you said, Josh, Miguel Vargas, he's the one I have being left off. He's like the odd man out. But if needed, he'll be able to suit up. He'll come in right there. This is where things get a little tricky, Josh, figuring out the 13 pitchers that we could see in a couple weeks. So I'll throw it over to you. Who do you got as the 13 pitchers cracking your opening day roster?
Well, so there's a couple of things that are kind of up in the mix, and this also includes the Seoul series from a bullpen standpoint, but then also for the starting pitchers, because James Paxton right now, there's some question marks. Bobby Miller is somebody that I'm going to have on the North American opening day roster. And I think there's only one guy that I would bump out in this case. And I think as of right now, obviously there are some guys that are not going to be able to pitch yet, but the starters, easy. I mean, Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto are your top two guys. Gavin Stone, Michael Grove, two guys that I think the Dodgers are obviously going to have on the roster this next week in Seoul. And then the bullpen, Ryan Brazier, Joe Kelly, Alex Vesia, Ryan Yarbrough, Evan Phillips. I think those are really easy ones. Blake Trinan took that line drive to the ribs the other day, but seems like he's okay. He's a guy that I think is an easy one to have on there. And then the next three, this is interesting for me because I feel like one of these guys comes out if Bobby Miller is it. I already included Bobby Miller. So one of these guys for me comes out, and it's Daniel Hudson, JP Feyereisen, and Gus Varland. I think, look, at this point, I'm just essentially naming everybody. But like those three guys, for me, I wonder if Hudson comes out for, when Bobby Miller's there. Because Bobby Miller, we know, is making the trip to Seoul, but he's not going to pitch in either of the two games against the Padres. So I think in an ideal world, Michael Grove probably comes out of the starting rotation. But again, are the Dodgers going to go with 4? Or are they going to go with 5? And I think that's the big question mark. And I'm curious to see what you think.
Yeah, so looking ahead, I mean, it's tough because there are so many question marks for some of these guys. I'll just do with my starting rotation first. Yamamoto, Glasnow, those guys are locks. Bobby Miller, James Paxton, once they're back to the States, they'll be in the starting rotation. They're probably going to be left off the roster next week in Seoul, but we'll get to when we kind of have some wild cards that might be making it next week. The biggest question mark I have is the starting rotation. Who's going to be that number 5 starter? It was probably likely going to be Emmett Sheehan, but he has not thrown in a game yet, and he got pretty hurt. Apparently, he has general body soreness from throwing BP to Shohei Ohtani like a month ago, and he just hasn't been able to bounce back. As of right now, I'm going to go with Gavin Stone, getting that 5th and final spot in the starting rotation. He's looked fantastic for the Dodgers this spring. But again, it's not confirmed. I don't think they've come out and said who's going to be that number 5 starter. So I'm going to go with Gavin Stone. And then just looking at my 8 bullpen pieces, these are just the guys I have if everyone's healthy. Pretty much I think exactly what yours was. Evan Phillips, Joe Kelly, Brusdar Graterol, Daniel Hudson, Blake Trinan, Ryan Brazier, Alex Vesia, and Ryan Yarbrough. Again, that's assuming everyone's healthy. But Josh, there are question marks with, I have 3 guys on here. Brusdar Graterol, I can't remember if this was reported. He might not even be making the trip to Seoul, but it sounds like he might start the season on the injured list. Daniel Hudson, we still don't know. We talked about him last week. They pretty much gave him a date of March 15th, which is tomorrow, if he wants to either opt out of his contract and retire, or if he wants to keep going. So we're not even 100% certain, Josh, if 24 hours from right now, Daniel Hudson's going to be retired. So he's a question mark. Blake Trinan, it sounds like he might be ready to go, but that that comebacker he took off the ribs looked pretty painful. I don't know if he'll be ready to go. So those are 3 guys right there that might not be, in the bullpen on opening day. So I guess I'll go with Michael Grove taking one of those spots, whether it's Brusdar, whether it's, Trinan, whether it's Hudson. And outside of that, the options are pretty slim. I think Kyle Hurt, he was mentioned as a name that could be included for that number 5 starter. I would much rather see Kyle Hurt as a bullpen piece. I think his stuff is better suited for the bullpen, so I would go with Kyle Hurt. And then I think you said Gus Varland as well as a potential option. He'll be my number 3 in case. So it's tough because if everyone's healthy, the bullpen seems pretty decided. But with so many question marks 2 weeks away, or even 1 week away from actual games, there are 3 guys. I don't know if they'll be in there or if they're going to be starting the season on the IL.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think making the Seoul opening day roster is a lot easier because Bobby Miller's only throwing an exhibition. He's not doing either of the games against the Padres. Paxton's not going to be ready. Brusdar, we're not even sure if he's going to be ready when they return from Seoul. But if he starts on the IL, but Brusdar is not going to be available. So those are 3 guys right there that I think you're already taken out, and then Emmett Sheehan as well. So there's 4 that I think from a South Korea perspective, I think it's easier to kind of make that roster. So I've got the 26 ready for Seoul, and I'm feeling pretty confident about that. But yeah, I think in a perfect world, you have Bruzdar there. I just don't think he's going to be ready. I'm not sure if Emmett Sheehan's going to be ready, but I think that's an easy one to toss in there. But hypothetically, if Bobby Miller and James Paxton are ready to go, and Bobby Miller, obviously you'd expect them to be, but Bobby Miller, or your rotation for me, Glasnow, Yamamoto, Bueller, Paxton, and then I agree. I think I'd rather have Gavin Stone in that fifth spot right now over Michael Grove, over Kyle Hurt. I'd love to see Kyle Hurt come out of the bullpen like he did last year at the end of the season. I think that's where he's best suited, at least as of right now. But for me, like, that leaves Grove out, that leaves Sheehan out, assuming that he still hasn't been able to bounce back. But yeah, at least for South Korea, I think some things are still up in the air, obviously, but it's a little bit more cut and dry than when they return.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just tough because there are so many of these question marks. But like you said, with this South Korea trip, James Paxton, who I said before the show, isn't even going. He's not even making the trip. I think Bobby Miller's making the trip, but he's probably not going to be on the active roster because he's not going to be starting. So the Dodgers are going to be running a pretty deep bullpen for these games. You essentially just need a two-man rotation for each of the games, and then you can essentially just have an 11-man bullpen. So, Josh, you look at all the pitchers that are currently on the active roster that aren't hurt, and it's pretty much everyone on there, like a Gus Farland, like a Kyle Hurt, like a Michael Grove, they're probably going to be on that roster for next week. Also, if Bruce Gratterall doesn't make it, if Blake Trinan doesn't make it, if Daniel Hudson doesn't make it, all of a sudden now you're having to go and dig into the minor leagues and figure out who you can add, or maybe some of these non-roster invites, maybe add them to the 40-man roster, and then once they come back from South Korea, say, all right, thanks for your services, here's a nice DFA. So I think we're going to have more clarity in 2 weeks when the Dodgers release their actual 26-man roster. But I'm really looking forward to whenever I don't know when it's going to come out, whether it's going to be next Monday or Tuesday, but this could be a really interesting pitching staff depending on everyone's health. They're literally, Josh, there could be a name or two that are on there that we didn't even mention. I think you briefly mentioned JP Fireeisen. I didn't include him. He might be a name that has to get added because there's no one else there. So this is going to be exciting because there could be some random wild cards that pop out of nowhere that all of a sudden are going to be pitching in one of those two games.
Yeah, and that's why so that's another reason why I include kind of Gavin Stone and Michael Grove in that starter role, because, God forbid anything happens with Glasnow or Yamamoto, or they just come out and for whatever reason aren't good. I think the Dodgers turn to one of those two guys before you even dip into the bullpen. So even if you want to include those two in the bullpen too, that just bolsters how deep that bullpen really could be for those 2 games in Seoul. But then again, look, after that, you return for 2 games against the Angels, right? And 2 more spring training games. And then you have the next opening day. So, I mean, I think those who knows what the lineup could even look like for those 2 games against the Angels, So
Yeah,
see what
right.
you get for these 2 games against the Padres, right? And then when you come back, then it's like, I think you'd like to think that some of those guys are going to be ready. Obviously, expecting Bobby Miller, hoping for James Paxton. But yeah, I think the rotation itself is going to be different.
Yeah, I like that you just mentioned that because thinking about those Angels games when they come back, I don't think the main guys are going to be playing in those because I think if I remember correctly, it's like a 2 or 3 days after they come back from Seoul. So maybe those games are just like all the minor leaguers that are left over that needs to be getting into games because it's the whole scheduling is just so weird how they're doing this, how they got to go to South Korea now. They got to play. I think they're playing one exhibition game on Sunday. Then they're playing the 2. Then they come back, play a couple exhibition games against the Angels, and then the season starts. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mean, I'll be watching the replays of it, Josh, because like we said, we're not going to be waking up at 3 a.m. to watch these games. Now, Josh, if Kyle Hurt is guaranteed to come out of the bullpen in these South Korea games,
not happening.
Is that going to make any impact? No. What if there's a rule allowed where he's allowed to come out wearing his Chatham Anglers jersey?
If there's an amendment to the MLB rule book, maybe I would wake up. Maybe I would wake up just to see it. Just to be on Twitter when that happens, so that the 10 people watching the game are like, what is going on? I'd be involved in that. I'd be one of those
Yeah.
10.
They'll be like, yeah, why is he coming out in a blue jersey? Josh, one final thing before we wrap things up. Since Dodgers spring training is officially over, I went to the stat page. I wanted to rattle off some stats from players this spring. It's pretty much every Dodger hit this spring. Freddie Freeman, 949 OPS. Max Muncy, 1,331 OPS. Shohei Ohtani, 1,486 OPS. James Outman, 1,173 OPS. Mookie Betts, a 1,131 OPS. Teoscar Hernandez, 1,090 OPS. All of the Dodgers' top, even Will Smith, a 921 OPS. All of the Dodger hitters were mashing the spring, with the exception of Jason Hayward. I have to scroll down. He's way down here. He had a bad spring. Chris Taylor had an okay spring. I think he had a grand slam the other day. He didn't do too much. Josh, out of that group, is there any? Well, I mean, again, it's 2 or 3 weeks of spring training. The numbers don't really matter. But rattling off those OPSs, was there any player that kind of stood out that made you go, huh? All right, I'm intrigued by how great you've looked this spring.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it is. Look, I think the way that I come into the spring too is I'm also looking at a lot of the guys that are like not your big name players. That's kind of how I look at it too. Like, so obviously wanting to watch Andy Pages, who was really good. He was really good too. He hit like 471. So, he was sick. And obviously he didn't play nearly as many games as some of the other ones. But yeah, I thought that he was good. I'm trying to think. There were a few. Oh, Austin Barnes had a few swings that I thought were just absolute jolts, and were not, but looked good. So that didn't really work out well for him. But yeah, I think it's hard when you go in. Obviously, I thought Freddie Freeman was really good. I thought Max Muncy was really good. Shohei obviously was fantastic, and obviously he gave his OPS too. But yeah, from an OPS standpoint, I'm pretty sure Andy Page has finished first, but he only played in the 7 games. So yeah, he finished top of the charts for the Dodgers. So he was really good. Obviously, I think people are excited about him for a reason, and I wonder what his ETA at this point is after an impressive spring. So I would like to think that, you never want to see injuries, but I would love to see him get a crack at some point later this season. I feel like we're not too far away from that. So I typically tend to watch the young guys during spring training, but all the guys who you expect to do well, except for maybe 1 or 2, did really well. And of course, the Dodgers dominated the Cactus League this spring. I mean, 13-5, first in the Cactus League. Not that it matters, but I mean, even, obviously you don't watch every single game. And there were days when, like, you just take out your phone and you're like, wow, they beat the Mariners 8-1 today or something like that. Like, it was just
right.
It seemed like every day somebody was doing something, and that was pretty good to see. And you saw what you wanted to see out of a lot of the big names, especially the pitchers too.
I talked about all these players, Josh, just lighting it up at the plate this spring. But poor old Austin Barnes, despite having a short sample size where he could just really juice those numbers, he appeared in 10 games, had an OPS of 573.
Yeah, not great. Not good.
Can we just get to this point, Josh? I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago. Whenever Austin Barnes comes up in 2024, if there is a runner on base and there is either 0 or 1 outs, can we just have him laying down a bunt every single time? Because we're at the point now where he's about as, guaranteed to get a hit as you and I would be. You might as well help the team out and get a guy into scoring position, Because this dude is not going to hit the ball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, great guy and all. Great school. Hometown kid.
Great, yeah. Good education, yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, Josh. It did take us 2 minutes to figure out the whole time difference thing earlier.
Yeah, that wasn't our best work. You know who actually? I don't want to call a guy out. This is more of talking about how good he was last year. I was disappointed with Hunter Fiducia this year because the guy hit 348 with an OPS at 1.18 last year, and then this year he hit 083 at spring training across 9 games. But Hunter Fiducia was unreal last year. So yeah, there was a time last year people were like, Hunter Fiducia opening day roster? Maybe.
Right.
Is he going to steal Austin Barnes' job?
But not if Austin Barnes is out hitting him this spring. That's
No, he's
if
not.
Austin Barnes is posting a
And he
better
did.
slash than you. Not great. Not great. A few pitchers I want to give a shout out to, Josh. Tyler Glasnow finishes his spring with a 0.90 ERA, 14 strikeouts in 10 innings. His last two starts of the spring, I believe he went 8 1/3 hitless innings. He didn't allow a hit, almost threw a combined no-hitter. The dude was absolutely shoving. Yamamoto had a lot of strikeouts. His ERA looked kind of bad because his defense sucks. Not going to be too worried about him. Gavin Stone, we talked about him earlier, 0.93 ERA in 4 games this spring. He looked really good. And a couple other, that's kind of really it. No one else really stood out looking at these pitchers. It was pretty much Glasnow, pretty much Gavin Stone. Ryan Brazier had an 8.5 ERA. That's not great. But the beauty is, Josh, it's a few games in spring. None of it matters. It's easy to get excited about the players that are looking really, really good. And then it's really easy to turn on the players that look really, really bad. But that's spring. We actually have something to talk about in a couple weeks when the stats actually matter. And when Shohei Ohtani starts this season 2 for 14, and we're all going, my God, what have we done? Why did we give $700 million to this guy? Yamamoto allows 4 runs in 5 innings in his first start, and we're thinking, man, this guy is not built. That is when Dodger baseball will truly be back. And Josh, I'm going to give it to you right now. What is your over/under on how many games into the season do we have our first Sky is Falling episode? I think we had 3 last year. I think we had
3 Sky is Falling episodes. Yeah,
I think we had 3. So over/under on games into the season, we have our first Sky is Falling episode. Last year, I want to say it was the first week.
Yeah. It was the first week. I'm gonna go over/under. Let's go 11 games.
Okay.
11 games.
So
Is that too low?
I think that's good 2 weeks into the season. If the Dodgers start like 4-8, something like that, we'll be panicking. We'll be telling them to burn this thing down.
Trade Shohei.
Trade Shohei, trade Yamamoto, and make Kyle Hurt your number 1 starter. But that does wrap things up for this week's episode of Inside the Ravine. Again, you guys can find the show on whatever social media app you guys use. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Inside the Ravine. You guys can also watch the full episodes over on YouTube. Just search Inside the Ravine. Wherever you get your podcast, whether that's on Spotify, Apple, of course, the Odyssey app, you guys can tune into the episode over there as well. Josh, before we head out for the week, before the Dodgers head to South Korea, before I head to the beautiful city known as Las Vegas, any final parting words for, I guess, the finale on spring in regards to our episodes?
Don't lose all your money betting on the Dodgers when you're in Vegas.
I'll try.
There's no promises, I know.
I'll lose it on roulette instead.
That seems more up your alley. So
it does.
It definitely does. But I have seen things go in your favor. So at beautiful Morongo, out in the middle of the desert.
Oh, were you there for that one time when the entire car ride, everyone is just telling me, Blake, no balls, put $100 on black. You won't. And everyone just bullied me and talked me into it. And then I walked into Morongo, laid a nice Benjamin Franklin down on the table.
Yep. America's finest president.
Yeah. ASU, baby. ASU. But also, I did hit, Josh.
We played that song. You did hit. No, you did hit.
Okay, good. I did hit.
Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, we played that for you when you were walking out. And you were like,
yeah.
Or whatever.
That was great.
One of your little dance moves with the punches. Yeah.
A very successful trip to Morongo. Maybe we'll have that again in Vegas. But I think that's a perfect way to end the show, Josh, because it sounds like your microwave's ready. Sounds like lunch is getting ready to be served.
Yes, it does.
So, all right, as always, thank you guys so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. Again, make sure to follow us wherever, watch the show wherever, listen wherever, do all that fun stuff. For Josh Schaefer, this has been Blake Harris. Thank you guys so much for listening. We do appreciate it, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week wherever you may be.